Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining me, Tara Myshrall, for another Women's Spotlight. As you all know, every month I bring you a woman that's up to phenomenal things. My point in doing this is to remind you that your dreams are possible and that you're capable of anything you want. We follow these amazing women and all of their triumphant stories, and today's going to be no different. Today with me, I have Giovanna Capozza, who I'm so excited to bring on the show because she's all about love. And if you've been paying attention to me lately, I'm trying to tap into my love game a little bit more so I can diversify in life. So with that, welcome, Giovanna. Thank you for coming today. We're so excited to have you.
Yeah, thank you. And of course, as predicted, my dog has decided to join the party here. I'm actually going to do a dog mom thing and distract him with a little treat. There you go, buddy.
Oh, I love it. I was just, I love dogs and we're happy to have him. So if he wants to show his face at any time, please don't hesitate to bring him on screen.
Well, I'm hoping he doesn't because he's 83 pounds. And sometimes he decides to, put his front paws on my leg. And it's like, dude, you don't realize how big you are. It's like he's a golden retriever. He's a big suck.
Oh, I love it. How old is he?
He's going to be 3 in April. Yeah.
Awesome.
So we rescued him just right end of February before the pandemic started.
Oh, that's perfect timing.
Yeah.
You got a lot of time with him at home then. That's
totally. Cool. Yeah. He's totally a lockdown dog.
Awesome. Well, with your lockdown pup at hand and all of the wonderful work you've been doing, I see you have your book behind you, Love Well. Congratulations on releasing that. And today we're going to dig into the book. But before we do, for those of you out there who have never heard of Giovanna, I call her the love expert. She's gone on a journey around the world from a spiritual junkie to a solo travelist to find out, as living in 3 continents, what love really means for her, because she calls herself the lovesick woman for so long until she realized that to love externally, you have to love yourself first. So Giovanna, tell us a little bit about, being 19 years old, going and getting your first self-help book, and how'd you go from there to writing a book about loving well?
Oh my God, what a journey. So yeah, I always laugh at that because it's like, I grew up in a household with a pretty chaotic household, right? Like my parents did not have a healthy relationship. But I knew from a young age, I didn't want all the trappings of what I saw in my very traditional Italian house. I didn't want to be a housewife. I didn't want to just hunker down with babies. I always knew that I wanted something bigger for myself. And I knew that it included love, but I didn't want that. So I bought myself this book. It's one of the best books to this day. It's by Harville Hendrix. It's called Getting the Love You Want. And I laugh because I think, well, if I read my first self-help book at 19, obviously all of my relationships and everything was great thereafter. So not true. Because you really do. I mean, wisdom really is that, combination of knowledge and experience, right? And you do have to have, it's not enough to have the knowledge. You have to also have the experience of something for it to become wisdom, right? So I went from buying that book to my own sort of exploration with relationships. And it's funny because, even when you have the knowledge of what you want, and this is me, and this is you, and this is all of us, you may know exactly what you want, but unless you, as Carl Jung says, make the unconscious conscious and deal with that stuff, it's going to run your life and you're going to call it fate. And you're going to say, wow, this is just, why has this happened to me? Or how did I do this again? And why am I with the same guy? But it's he looks different. He has different clothes on and he has a different job, but it's the same person. And that's because what I wasn't addressing in all this time was all of my unconscious stuff. Right. And so how that ended up becoming a book is, and I talk about this in the book, is I hit my relationship rock bottom. I ended up getting involved with a man who was a narcissist, who the relationship was abusive. It was really undermining. And I just hit that relationship rock bottom. And I got to the place, I was living in Australia. I was literally on the other side of the world. I was far away from everyone that I knew or who loved me and cared about me. And it got really dark when I hit that moment, and I was suicidal, and I was walking home after having cried all night and taking myself on a morning walk thinking it would clear my head. And really the only thing that stopped me probably was my sister, because she called from here, from Toronto. She called me there, and my WhatsApp went off, and it sort of was enough of that pattern interrupt. And I broke down on the phone with her, and I had to basically go on a healing journey from there. I was working with a coach at the time, and she brought to my attention that I was an addict. And I didn't like that word. I didn't want to be labeled that. I was like, no, I don't want to be called that. She said, but you are an addict. She's like, you're addicted to this illusion that romantic love or a partner or someone is going to save you. And she said that you're an addict to that. You're using men, you're using relationship, you're using romance. And because I was so lost, when why does everyone I love keep leaving me? Or why do I get involved with people and I want to leave? Or like, why isn't this ever like, this is the one thing I wanted my whole life. And like, why is it just not working out ever?
And there's so much to unpack there, Giovanna. Like there's so much, starting with your subconscious or unconscious belief system, right? I call it excavating out the basement, because many of us don't even realize that it's a child running our life with learned behaviors that we feel keep us safe, that keep coming up and repeating that same pattern. So I absolutely agree with you on that. And then how that attracts and spirals the same type of people and narcissistic behavior. And you wonder, well, why does everyone I love leave me? And they leave you because you're subconsciously or unconsciously choosing the things that you aren't going to work. So when you're in that pattern where you're at the rock bottom, where you feel like life is over because you feel alienated, alone, and unworthy, you got that pattern interruption from your sister. What did you do next? How did you get out of that relationship?
Well, that relationship rock bottom, that was actually the end of it, right? So it was already over, and I had been hanging on for months, hoping that it wasn't. And so that night that happened, I had gone back to him to try and salvage it. I thought there was something there that just wasn't there, right? And he had already moved on, and he basically told me to take a hike. And it was really, again, I talk about it in the book. It was a horrible night, but that relationship was already done. What was starting at that time is because this was brought to my attention about this addiction, which there is a thing called love addiction. And there is a spectrum to love addiction. Like I always tell people, like, it's that word addiction is so triggering for people, but I have to tell you, it has been the single most life-saving word for me, because it made me look at what and where I was addicted in my whole life. Because you can be addicted to your emotions, you can be addicted to people, you could be addicted to your job, to success, to your image. It doesn't have to be heroin, right? It could be cupcakes, right? Yeah. You can be addicted to anything.
Let's dig into that a little more, right? Because you've got this subconscious, unconscious thing running your life, and then you want to self-medicate because you need to be able to cope with the fact that you're not living your fullest expression of self. So it might be wine, it might be love, it might be the gym. For me, it was all about achievement. If I wasn't hitting a new award or hitting a new standard in my career, I felt I was unworthy. Now, how do you break it down to feel worthy in the moment so that you can attract the right type of love?
The biggest thing for me, the biggest job was first, coming to terms with that was true, right? Because, you've been coached before and you're a coach, right? So like, there's these moments where you get this insight given to you, or you have the insight, and it's simultaneously this like gut punch, but also this truth of like, oh my God, she's right? Like this is wow. So I had to face that. And actually what I did is, because what I do is I'm like a researcher, like I need to go into stuff. So I started research because I was like, how could you be addicted to love? Like love is a good thing. Like who cares if you're addicted to love? Like I'm a hopeless romantic. Like this is ridiculous, right? But I actually started researching it, and I dove into the material to understand why I was doing what I was doing. Why was I choosing the men I was choosing? Why was I having this heartbreak repeatedly? Why would I get involved with certain men that then they'd bore me and I'd break up with them? Or what was me? Like, what was going on with me? So I just dove into research, and I researched the crap out of love addiction and codependency. And I really just got into understanding me and what made me tick. Because just like you said, you could be addicted to all of these things, but really the addiction, no matter what it is really, like you said, it's a compensation for something that is unfulfilled in you, some part of you that's in pain. And for me, and for a lot of women that struggle in relationships or with relationships, the wounding is this feeling of being unlovable. In fact, that was the original title of the book, right? Unlovable.
That's so powerful.
Yeah.
Unlovable. Like, I diddy daddle with unworthiness, but unlovable is such a powerful word. And generally, I think from the work I've done, it starts in our childhood and it just wreaks havoc throughout our life, right? Yeah. So when you feel like you're unlovable, for me, how that comes up is a clinging to love. Like when something is about to leave your life, you just hold on to it, which is kind of the opposite as a spiritual junkie that we learn, right? We learn release. And if it comes back, surrender. And if it comes back, it's ours. But in love, I found, we cling, and that clinginess is like almost like a scarcity, right? So when I coach on abundance versus scarcity, if we're clinging to love, that's because we feel love is scarce, but love is the most powerful, abundant emotion on the planet, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
So tell us more about how you've done the work and you switched out of that clinginess.
Yeah. Well, there's actually two types of people. There's the person that clings, and the person that pushes away, right? So so attachment style and attachment theory has been developed for many, many years, but in terms of relationship sciences, it's becoming really, really big now for people to understand how they attach in a committed relationship. So if you are an anxious attacher, then you will cling at the first sign of someone pulling away, or maybe they're not answering your calls, or they're not answering your text messages, or you're hyper vigilant to their mood and maybe they're off. Your survival mechanism which is ruled by your fear of abandonment will kick in, and you'll cling, you'll want to pull forward or pull closer to that person. And usually, and this is statistically speaking, and it's unfortunate, but usually the person that is manifesting that behavior has the other type of attachment style, which is an avoidant attachment style. And an avoidant attachment style is really when you still have this need for relationship, you still want love, but the idea of it makes you really afraid. You're afraid of engulfment. You're afraid of abandoning yourself, right? Losing yourself. So you end up putting a wall between you and the other person. And the closer they draw to you, the more threatening that feels to you. And there's different types of parenting and developmental trauma that runs either of these. Both of these people want love. Like, we're humans, we're made for love and connection, but they have different wounding. So for me, just because I love to do things just my own way, Tara, I have what's called a disorganized attachment. So a disorganized is both.
I think that's what I have. I have both. That's why I'm drawn to you.
Right?
Push away, pull back, push away, pull back.
Totally. And look, I tell you, like, you talked about a certain type of woman, like the women that come to work with me, they're VPs in tech, they're lawyers, they're doctors, they're really successful, right? So there's this kind of like hidden shame of like, why can't I figure this part of my life out, right? But and they manifest the same too, right? They're manifesting in that same kind of disorganized way. Now, attachment theory is huge and it's complex, and there's like even more subcategories within those, but just to sort of keep it simple. And that disorganized attached person kind of does both. So to answer your question in a really long way, the first half of my, love seeking and my relationships, I saw that. I saw a little bit of that clinginess happening with the wrong guys. But mostly I was presenting in this shielded way, right? Where I wanted to be in the relationship, but I had a big protection shield up, right? And I remember my very first spiritual mentor who I met when I was 19. She, and she's my girl, my go-to to this day. She, said to me, she goes, you know, you're not very vulnerable. Like you have a problem with vulnerability. And I was like, that's not a nice word. Like that means weakness, right? Of course, thank God now because of Brene Brown, we know that vulnerability is a superpower.
Love Brene.
Right?
Absolutely.
But we didn't know that back then. So the V word was very much like your weakness. And she, you know, she explained that to me even way back then and said, you know, about opening this up, right? And not being so closed off. And yet when I did that, I was constantly getting hurt. So I would
Yes.
lock it back up, right?
And then it's like self-preservation. So I completely can empathize with what you're saying. And I've walked there. I've always had this shield. I remember my coach saying, Tara, when are you going to put your sword down? Right. And it was this tough Teflon because I'm a VP in a tech company, as you suggested. I'm out there doing great things in the community. But when it came to love and relationships, I'd been hurt. And I had that, mindset of, why does everyone I love leave me? And so when you just said that, it really resonated with me because the only way to love is through vulnerability. The only way to love is through authenticity. And even for me in my current career, even doing these podcasts was scary for me because that means I'm showing up with a different side of myself. And at first I was like, can I do this with a career? And you're right. Once you step into authenticity and vulnerability and you say, well, I can be all of these things, right? And I can be honest about my areas of opportunity. And I'm honest that, yeah, my area is putting the shield down, putting the sword down, and opening to love. So right on point. Thank you so much for that. I'm sure so many others like us at home really needed to hear that.
It's hard for women to do in particular because we have been, we've been socialized in such extreme polarities. Like prior to the women's movement, it was like, your superpower was to be like a wife and a mother. And that was your identity and that was your role, right? And then we had our women's movement and we broke free from that and we were burning bras and we were liberated sexually. We were liberated in all these different ways. And we wanted to go out there and, play with the big boys, so to speak. But in order to do that, many of us had to put on what David Data calls a masculine shell. David Data is one of my teachers who I love. 2 bits.
I love as well. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Put our femininity aside, put our heart space aside, stay in our masculine logic and show up as masculine as we can in this masculine world.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so we've put on that shield. And for many of us, it's really hard to take off, right? It's really hard. And it's also like, I don't want to take it off because that's like, that protects me and that makes me be able to be in a boardroom and be respected and be taken seriously. And so I don't want to take that off. And yet, the universal law of polarity is a universal law for a reason. Like that is the true meaning of opposites attract, right? It's not just like you like apples and I like oranges and we're the opposite and we attract. It's like, no. You have this feminine energy and I have this masculine energy and together we attract. And this is, beyond, this is not about gender identification or orientation. This is actually energy. And so if you are a predominantly energetic feminine or a yin, right? If we want to talk about yin and yang, and you're walking around with this shield of masculine protection because, that's what helps you function in your world and your career, it makes it really hard then to connect to your own vulnerability and to even attract and connect into that very opposite energy that you actually yearn for.
Mm-hmm.
So there's so much going on here. I mean, as you can tell, I can talk about this for days.
Me too, right? Like I love writing about the law of polarity because sometimes we feel that we have to show up in one way or the other, right? And I love to cook. It doesn't mean I want to be in a relationship where I have to cook. I love to cook. Love is one of my love languages is cooking. but I'm also in a boardroom and I'm also writing on a newspaper and so in order to attract a person who can accept and love all of that, I have to bring my masculine and feminine to the table, but my masculine has to be dialed down, what I've come to realize, because if I want to attract a masculine man, I've got to be open to receiving. And I've been doing all kinds of reading about that. So, tell us more about when we're going out there to find, that opposite or that polarity, how that works in a relationship when, we put down the masculine guard, we open up to receiving. And that is kind of when we get that opposite in, right? So tell me about how that's happened in your own life. Oh, you're on mute.
I've muted myself.
No problem.
Whining to go out for a pee. That's why. So I had to mute him out. It's hard to do because we don't know how to do that. It's like, it's even that concept of like stepping into your vulnerability and embracing your vulnerability. It's like, well, how do you do that? Right. And so we don't really have this modeled for us. And for me, I was very much into my career and I was ambitious and I was like I still am a card carrying, like feminist, go girl promoter. Right. So I was like, do I got to turn into that, like, oh, smelling salts, like fainting girl? Like, I don't like her. I don't want to be that person.
Yeah,
so here's the thing is I thought there was something external that I had to be. I thought that there was a version of me that I had to turn into that felt like not authentic. And really what got me to openness and to receiving and to that softness that could embrace that was doing the work on myself. And so I had to go in and do the inner child work. We talked about that just before we pressed record, right? I had to go in and befriend her and get to know her and start to heal like wounds around my mom and my dad. I mean, especially my dad, right? Because for a woman, your dad's your first boyfriend, right? Good, bad, or ugly, right? And mine was critical.
What a relationship is like. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I had to address that because my dad was critical and he was scary to me as a kid. He just had a bad temper. He was always yelling. And so, doing all of this work within myself. And I always tell women, like, being okay and good with your vulnerability has really nothing to do with external. Like, you can't read enough books. You can't do enough, self-help seminars. You really have to get okay with your own vulnerability. And when you can embrace that, you can embrace your weaknesses, you can embrace your shadow parts, right? And all of that, then you're okay. Then you can discern, hey, is this person worthy of my vulnerability? And if they are, you're okay to put it out there because you're not worried, oh my God, what if I can't trust them? And what if I put this out there and they're going to hurt me? Because you ultimately trust yourself. And that just is internal work, right?
That's so powerful. That self-trust, that discernment, that equanimity, the ability to sort of stand back and say, I'm a complete whole person and you're a complete whole person. And together we're going to make a super relationship. I remember, you said 19 was your first self-help book. Mine was 9.
Wow.
I remember being in grade 6 reading The Bridges of Madison County, right? Like, who the heck does that?
Oh my God.
Hopeless romantic.
Woman after my own heart.
I stayed with my son's dad for like 22 years on and off, because I was like, there's no way I can't make this work. And it's not till now that I can genuinely appreciate that discernment you talk about, because when we fill our cup, when we feel good, when we feel like we love and can trust ourselves, we will not settle for anything other than that out there. And we attract that. But when we're coming from that scarcity, we attract the wrong man. And I mean, when you're watching Netflix and you see the Twinder Swindler or whatever.
I heard about that.
You get scared, right? You're like, well, if I open up and I'm completely vulnerable, what if I attract this type of person? And I think, as you've hit the nail on the head, if you truly love and trust yourself, you won't be attracting that because everything's energy, right?
Yeah. And you won't ignore the red flags. Like, I haven't watched that yet. I heard a couple clips about it on the radio and I thought I want to watch that because to me, I'm such a study of how human behavior works when it comes to relating. I'm so fascinated by it. My stepdaughter is enthralled with this show, Love is Blind, which she totally got me hooked into. And for me, it's homework, right? I'm just like, isn't that interesting that, this is how she's presenting and this is the perception. And this is, I could just study that all day.
And that's where your science and your spirituality come in.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Because
human behavior, relationship sciences, and just, that spiritual connection to self it's just so interesting how that manifests. But, a lot of people are afraid, as I was after my, relationship rock bottom. I stayed single for 4 years. My first year, I said, I need to develop a relationship with my own spirituality, which, I'd been saying for years, I'm spiritual, not religious. And I was doing the things. I was buying the right books. I was doing the workshops. I, had the right labels. But I realized when I was like 37 years old that, my relationship to my spirituality was just like, a pretty bookmark. It was, it was a bumper sticker. I wasn't actually leaning on anything. There wasn't anything, there wasn't anything bigger than me that I was trusting and leaning in. And so the first year I took off just to date God, as I called it. And then I was afraid, right? Like I didn't want to get back. I didn't want to get swindled again, right? I didn't want to get into another dangerous situation because I really had gotten hit with ignoring my red flags, and I would imagine with these women from that Netflix special that's part of the fear moving forward, right? Is when you've ignored your red flags to such a degree that it's hurt you, you lose the ability to trust yourself to move forward. And that takes some work, right? Like that took a lot of unraveling and work for me to kind of trust myself again and my intuition.
Yes. And then without that trust, we can't be, it's like our compass, right?
Totally. Yeah.
The other interesting thing there is I'm a feminist as well. And in being a feminist, I believe in women's equity. And I believe that we all need to come together, right? It's not just about women. If we help women, we're helping men, right? And so absolutely, I love everybody. Yeah. What I've come to realize, though, is as we're battling with this as women, men are also really struggling. And I'd love to hear your perspective on when we don't show up in our femininity, we don't trust, when we try to stick specifically in our logic mind, and we don't have that polarity within us. What does that do to the men that are out there? Because I'm starting to investigate and discover, we have this perception, many women, that men are out there to take, like this swindler on Netflix. And many men are the opposite. They just want to love us. They just want to give to us. They just want to fill our cup, but they don't know how to approach it because society has continuously pushed them away from what they know and that primal desire to fill our cup, right? Because back in the caveman days, they were gunning for our attention. It was not the way it is today. So as women and as men, when we start to think of that coming up in our vulnerability, what does that do for men out there? And when we don't, how does that impact them in your opinion?
There's so much to unpack there. So it's funny, as you're talking, you're pulling out all these themes. I just did like a mini training, which is on YouTube, and it's the 5 unconscious ways we block love.
5 unconscious ways we block love. Let's just repeat that for you guys. Check that out. It's on YouTube. We'll also put the link in the with this. So go ahead. Pardon me.
Yeah, no. And it's, you're really picking out some of those themes. So, one of the ways that we do that is we're not in touch with our vulnerability, right? We're not comfortable with it. We don't show up willing to go there and being vulnerable. And then this other piece that you talked about really, we have the concept of toxic masculinity, right? But no one's talking about just beautiful masculinity, right? And so I think
high grade man is all about that power, that masculinity, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And so my dog is totally distracting me because he's got to go out for a pee.
No problem. We love dogs. It's okay.
Are you okay if I pause and do that?
Yeah, sure.
Can I just do that? So this idea of, toxic masculinity we've been talking about a lot, I think has really taken away from, like you said, the beautiful, amazing men that are out there. And, it's understandable. Like when we talk about the patriarchy, I always try to remind women, like, we're not talking about men in particular. We're talking about this idea that, men have ruled the world, right? But it doesn't necessarily speak to each individual man. There's so many beautiful men out there. And you said something really pivotal, and it is one of the 5 ways we unconsciously block love, which is we need to revisit and revise and heal our relationship to the masculine. Because if you do have a belief system that they're all cheaters, or they're all out to get you, or you've lumped every man into the patriarchy, right? Then you're leaving a lot of beautiful men just on the table out there, really just waiting for a good partner. And so that is one of the pivotal things that you need to do, right? And I needed to do this, and we all need to do this, is what is my relationship to the masculine? How do I feel about men? Do I genuinely like them? Do I even want one in my life? Like if I'm walking around going, oh, my life is amazing and I don't need a man and I don't need a man, then stop dating. Because when you show up that way, what's happening is the masculine, and again, the energy, not the gender, the person, the masculine energy needs to feel relevant in your life. They need to feel that they have something to bring. And if you've got it all together and you're like, I don't need you and I don't need you and I don't need a man, then there's no place for them to add value. And the number one thing that the masculine wants to do is add value, right?
Absolutely.
Not to say we don't, but that's their number one thing.
Yeah, add value, show up, take care of us, provide for us. Like that is in our DNA and in their DNA. And I just like to take a second, because for all of those listening, I lived exactly what you're explaining. And I am still breaking those boundaries, because I grew up as a tomboy. But being a tomboy was a defense mechanism. Being the toughest girl on the block was a defense mechanism. Being strong with all the guys so that they didn't want to date me, they just wanted to hang out with me, was a defense mechanism, because I never wanted to be known as the pretty girl. I was a chubby kid who just wanted to be accepted by the boys, because I grew up with 4 younger brothers and I didn't know what it meant to walk a feminine road. Thank God my mom is a very strong woman too. She drove trucks. She's been there with my dad. But what did that mean, showing up and soft and saying I needed somebody? And it's interesting, because as I progressed in my career, I got more into, I don't need this.
Yeah.
And it was one day I went to a Tony Robbins event, and I remember the lady on stage, I can't recall her name, but she said, it's okay to let that man put your luggage up in the compartment and just say thank you.
Yeah.
And I don't know why that was such a game changer for me, but I was not only the type to take my luggage out from the plane, being an avid traveler, but I'd take out the luggage for others around me, including men. And for me, that was the moment when I think I opened more to receiving. I was okay to say, yes, please open the door for me. Yes, please make me dinner. Yes, please take my luggage down. Because it's not about the inability to do so. We can all do it ourselves.
Of
it's
course,
about the ability to receive
it
from the masculine. And it's such a game changer.
Yeah. It's tough when you haven't had it modeled for you. And I don't think we have, especially like I'm from Gen X, right? Like I'm 46 this year, and
Gen X too.
Right? So you either got modeled the 50s housewife or the bra burning like feminist, get out of my way. And there's an in between to that, right? And I always tell women, like, it still shows up for me in my relationship, right? Like something just happened with like something in the family, and I got triggered by it. And I remember I was telling my partner, I was like, okay, and you make sure you say this, and you got to do this, and like do that. And he was like, babe, I got it. And I was like, okay, right? Like, okay, right? He's got it. And I have to trust that he has it. And I have to lean back and let him, right? Otherwise, what we're doing is, first of all, we're constantly emasculating men otherwise. And
Exactly.
they're not going to want to continue in that dynamic if that's how you're showing up. Now, there's so many reasons that women show up that way, right? We're stressed. We're running around handling everything, you know, kicking ass and taking names at home, at work. And so there's reasons we show up that way. We get into, you know, we get depleted. We get into adrenal fatigue. We get into fear. Like there's reasons we show up that way, right? So I don't want women listening to this going, oh my God, that's me. And I'm like, I'm horrible. It's like, no, you're not horrible.
You're like all of us.
You're all of us. Yeah. And these are just habits and ways of being that we really need to cultivate. And so one of the models, because we haven't had it modeled for us, that I tell women to look at is I say, look at a queen. A queen is like the best sort of version of that integration of that divine masculine and feminine, right? Because she rules the country. She rules her subjects. She could be off with your head, right? But she equally could be nurturing and providing. And so to look at that model of how, and she doesn't, yeah, she can go out there and make her own sandwiches and do her own stuff. She could do whatever she wants. She's a queen, but she actually is able to sit on her throne and receive. And it's not taking away from her power. She's open to receiving. So I like that archetype of the queen is such a beautiful archetype to look at and to learn from for us, I think, on how to still be strong and powerful and feel like we can be ourselves and show up in a way that's still soft and embracing and receiving, so that that man who is beautiful in their masculine, or at least working on his own cultivation of that, can actually show up for you as well, right? And so you did ask me about like, how do I see it impacting men? And I want to get back to that because I think men who have this deep yearning to really find that healthy masculine have also gotten caught up in this image of toxic masculinity that they don't even know how to navigate, right? It's like, we grew up shushing our little boy, don't cry, be a man, suck it up, right? And there's this idea of what the masculine is that I think modern men right now are grappling with, and they're trying to figure out. And, there's been that pendulum swing too with men where they've gone more into that feminine energy and away from this. And frankly, some of them are so confused. They don't even know how to be.
Absolutely.
How do I approach her? What do I say to her? Like, Absolutely. Is she gonna, and it's,
and I don't know if these dating apps are making it any easier on them, right? Because it's not forcing the conversation. It's keeping it very superficial in many of the circumstances where they sit in their disconnect, right? And it's unfortunate, but I think dialogues like this will help open the conversation. And I do believe that the first step is women being open to receiving and allowing that energy from men in. Now, do you write about this in your book at all? I know your book is like, there's a lot of your work is about inner child. So I want to touch on that next before we run out of time. But do you have any of this masculinity, femininity in the book? And if so, tell us a bit more about it.
Yeah, not yet. So this is very much my story. It's a memoir. It is kind of a self-help memoir because I do talk about my journey through like healing myself. Mm-hmm. The next book is really going to go into more of these themes and talk about this more. But even though I didn't talk about it fully in the book, this was part of my journey, right? Like I had to reconcile that in a relationship, you and your energy and the energy you bring you have to be so responsible for it. And of course you can't do that all the time. I mean, we just went through a pandemic and I was not all like Zen master guru, like trust. I was not, right?
So through some things and back,
right? So like we're all work in progress. Nobody has this down, but we are responsible for the energy that we bring, right? When we're dating, when we're in the committed relationship, and that very much has an influence on the masculine, right? So like, for this example I gave with my partner, like if I keep harping on that issue and I keep trying to get in there and I keep trying to control and I keep trying, like, yeah, you know, he's gonna stand up and just tell me what's what, which is good because that's him being strong and his masculine. But if this is like a perpetual thing, eventually like it wears away at your partner, right? And you see this happening a lot when a baby comes along and there's a lot of fear and control that comes in with moms sometimes. And so they almost make that partner irrelevant,
Second,
right?
irrelevant, yeah.
And it's not even they feel second because they're babies and we have to make, you know, we have to baby them too. It's like they need to feel useful, right? And if it's like, no, I'll do it. We are basically then continuing the process of emasculation. And I think what's important for men, if there's men listening to this, is getting involved in men's work, going to men's groups, you know, finding someone that you can cultivate and learn the same way we as women don't have it modeled for us what a, you know, balanced, healthy feminine looks like, which is balanced with masculine and feminine, right? Like that queen. Men don't have that, you know, king archetype quite down yet either. And so, you know, and depending on what mothers they came from and who their ex-wives were, like, I mean, there's so much wrapped into their.
We need another show just on that. So
that's a whole other show.
Back, and we're gonna just focus on that.
Totally, yeah, totally.
But in our last minutes here, I do want to focus, like, so that, you know, your memoir. I'm sure it took you a while to get this out, and releasing it in the middle of a pandemic, but I know it's going to do wonderfully well. Can you tell us a little bit about who this book is dedicated to, and just about the journey of releasing this for us?
Yes. So the book is really the beginning of the book. The preface of the book has a dedication to the reader. And just to sum it up, because it's a couple of paragraphs, but to sum it up, it's dedicated to the little girl that lives in every grown woman, right? She's still walking around with the high heels that are too big for her and mom's dress. And, you know, we look like we're put together, and maybe she's a VP of a tech company, and maybe she's a lawyer, but maybe she's not, maybe she's even like a kick-ass stay-at-home mom and she's got all that together. Who knows? But she is this powerful thing in the world, but inside is still that little girl. And so the book is dedicated to that little girl that lives in all of us. The big, huge part of my work that I do is working with the inner child. And so that's who the book is dedicated to, and who I kind of really love to work with.
And it's, you know, it's part of my work. I'm definitely not a love coach because I'm not there yet, but I do coach on, you know, on permission to expand is my thing, right? Just stepping into your expansion. And one of the things that I decided really early on is if we don't heal and communicate with our inner child, if we continue to send her to her room and not hear what she has to say, then we can never be a full expression of ourselves, because she has a place at the table. Yeah. And for me, I found for so long, I was fighting for everyone else and I wasn't fighting for my inner child, and I wasn't hearing her voice, and it was preventing me from showing up in the most expressed version of myself. So thank you for that. And if you could go back and tell her, I mean, obviously you wrote a whole book for her based on your experience, but what are a couple of little nuggets you would tell her right now if you were communicating with her?
I love that question so much. I actually walk people through a process with their photo from when they were children with this. I really would tell her that it's okay for her to feel whatever she feels, and that she is loved. And she probably would still, like, she'd believe me 90% now, but there was a day where she never believed me. And really the way my in was with her was, everything you're feeling is okay. You're allowed to have these feelings, and I'm here and I'm listening, and I'm never going to leave you. And that's what I would say.
So powerful, so powerful, right? In a world where we're so black and white, right and wrong, that gray area is okay. And anything you feel deserves expression. You know, it's so impactful, because for me, what I always tell my inner child is, you have a right to be heard and I want to hear your voice, because I just shut her down for so long. So thank you so much for being on today. Thank you for taking us through your journey of feeling like a lovesick woman at the end of everything after that traumatic rock bottom breakup, pulling yourself out of feeling like you wanted to end it, to actually going out there and helping women and men fall in love and feel worthy of love and express love as a full expression of self. So I'm so honored to work with you today. I love the work you're doing. If you all haven't gotten the Love Well book yet, please get out there and get it. Check out Giovanna's website. We'll have the link included. And, you know, I'm really honest about, we need to have you back and dive even deeper into this toxic masculinity and femininity. So thank you for being here.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. I would love to come do a part 2. As you can tell, I could talk about this forever. So I love it. Thank you.
You're welcome. And thank you all for listening. I can't wait to have you back on, Giovanna. Have a wonderful day.
You too.
Thanks.